The sun beat down mercilessly on the adobe market, where the pregnant woman stood trembling, chains at her wrists. Traders barked their prices as townsfolk averted their eyes from her swollen belly. Through the dust and commotion came Gojo, the Apache warrior known for his silver and wisdom. His eyes locked with hers across the square. Without hesitation, he approached the traders, laying down more silver than they'd asked. The crowd fell silent as he broke her chains. But instead of sending her away, he spoke words that would echo through the canyons for generations. He claimed her not as property, but as wife. The territory had never witnessed such defiance of tradition from both worlds. Could an Apache warrior and a white woman truly forge a future where hatred had ruled for centuries? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dust billowed behind them as Gojo led his horse away from the adobe market. The pregnant woman perched uncomfortably behind him. Her hands, raw from the chains, now clutched his buckskin shirt. He felt her trembling. "My name, Elizabeth," she said, after they'd traveled in silence for an hour, her voice barely audible above the horse's steady gait. Why you buy me?" Gojo reached into his leather pouch and withdrew an eagle feather talisman, bound with sinew and adorned with turquoise beads. He handed it back to her without turning. "Eagles speak in dreams," he said in halting English. "Say woman with child come, child important, bridge between peoples." Elizabeth stared at the talisman, tracing its edge with her finger. "You think my baby is special?" Gojo nodded. "Medicine man see same dream. You not slave to Gojo, you honored guest of Apache." The crimson canyon walls rose around them as they followed a narrow trail marked only by subtle signs that Elizabeth couldn't discern. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across their path. "What you said back there," Elizabeth ventured. "About me being your wife?" "Words for white ears," Gojo explained. "White men respect only woman with husband. You safe as wife of Gojo." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, though her eyes remained wary as they scanned the unfamiliar landscape. The vastness of the territory stretched before them, red rock formations reaching toward the cloudless sky like nature's cathedrals. They stopped to water the horse at a hidden spring. Elizabeth slid from the saddle, wincing as her feet touched the ground. Without comment, Gojo knelt and examined her worn boots, then produced a pair of soft moccasins from his saddlebag. "Better for long journey," he said, offering them to her. "Thank you," she whispered, surprised by the kindness. As she changed her footwear, 3 riders appeared on the ridge above them, white men, rifles gleaming in the sunlight. Elizabeth froze. "Apache!" one shouted. "That's a white woman you got." "There!" Gojo stood slowly, hands visible. "My wife," he called back, his voice calm but firm. The lead rider spat. "Like hell she is. Hand her over or we'll take her." Elizabeth, fear gripping her throat, spoke before thinking. "He's telling the truth. I'm with him by choice." The men exchanged glances. "Stockholm Syndrome," one muttered. "She's been brainwashed." They dismounted, approaching with rifles raised. Gojo stood perfectly still, only his eyes moving as he assessed each man. When they were 10 paces away, he moved with startling speed, disarming the leader before the man could blink. The other 2 found themselves staring at their own knives, now in Gojo's hands. "We go now," Gojo said, backing toward Elizabeth. "No blood today." The men, disarmed but unharmed, watched in silent shock as Gojo helped Elizabeth back onto the horse. As they rode away, Elizabeth looked back to see the men still standing motionless. "You could have killed them," she observed. "Killing easy," Gojo replied. "Peace harder, more worthy." They rode in thoughtful silence until sunset painted the canyon walls with fiery gold. Cresting a mesa, Gojo reined the horse to a stop. Below them, nestled in a protected valley, lay the Apache village, a collection of wickiups arranged in a circular pattern around a central fire pit. Smoke from cooking fires rose in thin columns against the darkening sky. Home, Gojo said. Simply, Elizabeth studied the village, her future. Her hand moved unconsciously to her belly. Will they accept me? She asked. Gojo fingered the eagle feather talisman now hanging around his neck. Some yes, some no. Time will tell true story. He looked over his shoulder at her. You afraid? Elizabeth watched the last rays of sun disappear behind the distant mountains. Yes, she admitted, but I have nowhere else to go. Gojo nodded, understanding in his eyes. Then we go together. The Apache village fell silent as Gojo led Elizabeth into the central clearing. Women paused in their work, children stared with undisguised curiosity, and warriors straightened, hands resting casually on weapons. Elizabeth felt the weight of their stares like physical pressure. An elderly man with deep lines etched into his face approached. His headdress marked him as a person of importance, and the intricate paintings on his buckskin clothing told stories Elizabeth couldn't read. Hashke Naaba, Gojo greeted him with respect. The old man, the medicine man, Elizabeth realized, circled her slowly, his eyes lingering on her swollen belly. He spoke rapidly in Apache to Gojo. He asks if you are the one from his vision, Gojo translated. Before Elizabeth could respond, a beautiful Apache woman strode forward, her face contorted with fury. Nayenesgani, Gojo murmured, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. Nayenesgani spat words at Gojo, gesturing angrily toward Elizabeth. Though Elizabeth couldn't understand the language, the meaning was clear. Rejection, betrayal, outrage. She was promised to me, Gojo explained quietly to Elizabeth, many moons ago. The confrontation drew more villagers. An older woman, similar, enough to Gojo in features to be his mother, watched from the entrance of a nearby wickiup, her expression unreadable. Hashke Naba raised his hand, silencing Nayenesgani mid-tirade. He produced a small medicine pouch from his belt, its leather surface adorned with beads and feathers. With deliberate movements, he held it toward Elizabeth. He offers you medicine pouch, Gojo explained. Test and gift, both. Elizabeth hesitated, uncertain of the protocol. Acting on instinct, she bowed her head and extended both hands, palms up. A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. The medicine man placed the pouch in her hands, then spoke softly. He says to keep close until after child comes. Gojo translated. Protection for mother and baby. Hashke Naba turned to address the tribe, his voice carrying authority despite its age. Gojo didn't translate, but Elizabeth noticed. The crowd's reaction, some nodded in acceptance, others frowned or turned away. He says you stay, Gojo told her when the medicine man finished. Council will decide more after sleep and prayer. A group of elders led Gojo away toward a larger structure, leaving Elizabeth standing alone in the clearing. The villagers slowly returned to their tasks, though many continued to steal glances at her. Nayenesgani approached, stopping uncomfortably close. He will tire of you, she said in surprisingly clear English. When novelty fades, when he remembers his own kind, she strode away before Elizabeth could respond. Feeling exposed and vulnerable, Elizabeth clutched the medicine pouch, drawing comfort from its unfamiliar weight. Come, the voice startled her. Gojo's mother stood at her elbow, her weathered face stern but not unkind. She gestured for Elizabeth to follow. At the village's edge stood a small, unoccupied wickiup. The older woman led Elizabeth inside, where a sleeping mat of woven reeds lay next to a small fire pit. She pointed to a clay water jug and a folded blanket. Rest, she said in heavily accented English. Child needs strength. Before leaving, she placed a bundle of clean clothing beside the water jug, her fingers briefly touching Elizabeth's arm, the barest acknowledgement of her humanity. Left alone, Elizabeth sank onto the sleeping mat, exhaustion overtaking her. She examined the medicine pouch in the fading light, its unfamiliar symbols, both frightening and comforting. Whatever test the medicine man had set, she seemed to have passed it. Outside, She heard the village settling into evening routines, cooking, fires being stoked, children being called home, the rhythmic pounding of grain, so different from the world she'd known, yet filled with the universal sounds of community. Elizabeth placed the medicine pouch carefully beside her pillow and curled onto her side, one hand protectively over her belly. "We're safe for now," she whispered to her unborn child, "one day at a time." Dawn broke over the Apache village, painting the sky in delicate pinks and golds. Elizabeth emerged from her wickiup to find Gojo waiting, a wooden bowl of berries and nuts in his hands. "For strength," he said, offering her breakfast. They walked to a massive cottonwood tree at the village's edge, its sprawling branches providing shelter from the mounting heat. Seated in its dappled shade, Elizabeth gathered her courage. "I need to understand why I'm here," she said. "The truth." Gojo studied her face before responding. "My wife, Nadar, died 3 winters past. Our son also." His voice remained steady, but pain flickered in his eyes. "Sickness from white traders. Many in village died." "I'm sorry," Elizabeth said softly. "You? Your story?" he asked. Elizabeth sighed, her hand absently touching her belly. "My husband William was a schoolteacher. We were traveling west to start a new school when raiders attacked our wagon train." Her voice faltered. "They killed the men, took the women to sell." Silence stretched between them, a shared understanding of loss bridging their different worlds. "This child is William's," she added. Gojo nodded. "Child has good spirit, I see when I first look at you." A young Apache girl approached cautiously, carrying what appeared to be a partially completed cradle board. The intricate woodwork was decorated with symbols similar to those on the medicine pouch. "For baby," the girl said shyly, placing it before Elizabeth before darting away. Elizabeth ran her fingers over the smooth wood. "It's beautiful. My mother makes," Gojo explained, "traditional gift for new life." Surprised by this gesture of acceptance, Elizabeth blinked back unexpected tears. "I want to learn," she said suddenly. "Your language, your ways. If I'm to stay here, I should understand." Gojo's expression softened. "Good. I teach words. You teach me better English?" They spent the morning exchanging language. Simple nouns at first, then phrases. Elizabeth proved a quick study, her teacher's wife background serving her well. When Gojo was called away by other warriors, Elizabeth remained under the cottonwood, practicing the unfamiliar sounds. An elderly woman approached, watching Elizabeth with shrewd eyes. She introduced herself as Nijoni, the tribe's healer. When Elizabeth mentioned her knowledge of herbs, learned from her grandmother, Nijoni's interest visibly sharpened. Using gestures and the few Apache words she'd learned, Elizabeth described plants she recognized from their surroundings. Nijoni nodded, occasionally correcting her pronunciation. By midday, they were comparing healing practices, finding surprising similarities. When Elizabeth accurately identified a remedy for fever, Nijoni clasped her hand, the first touch of acceptance beyond Gojo's family. That evening, as sunset painted the mesas in fiery hues, distant thunder rumbled across the desert. Elizabeth stood outside her wickiup, watching lightning dance between towering clouds. Gojo joined her, his silent presence now comforting rather than intimidating. "Storm brings life to desert," he said, "like you bring new life to tribe." Elizabeth glanced at him, surprised by the sentiment. "Council asks many questions," he continued. "Some fear change you bring, others see strength in new blood." "And you?" Elizabeth asked. "What do you see?" Lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating his face, the strong lines, the watchful eyes, the quiet dignity. "I see path forward," he said simply. Two rivers join, become stronger together. As they watched the storm advance across the landscape, neither spoke again. But something had shifted between them. A foundation laid, a possibility taking root. Inside, Elizabeth's wickiup, the partially completed cradleboard, caught the last rays of sunlight, its unfinished state a promise of work yet to be done, a future yet to be shaped. A week passed, each day bringing small measures of acceptance for Elizabeth. She learned to grind mesquite beans into flour, to weave simple baskets, to speak more Apache phrases. Children no longer hid from her, but approached with curious questions about her pale skin and the baby growing within. The morning calm shattered when angry voices erupted near the central fire. Elizabeth emerged from her wickiup to see Nyanesganis, a brother Tseyi, confronting Gojo. The warrior held an obsidian knife, its blade catching the sunlight with menacing brilliance. "He challenges Gojo's honor," explained Jiu, Gojo's sister, who had become Elizabeth's reluctant guide to tribal customs. "Says bringing white woman insults ancestors." The confrontation drew the entire village. Elders formed a circle around the two men, their faces grave. Hashke Nabar spoke at length, gesturing toward the surrounding mountains, then to Elizabeth. "What's happening?" Elizabeth whispered. "Sacred challenge," Jiu replied. "Tseyi demands proof of Gojo's commitment to tribe and to you." She pointed to the obsidian knife. "That belonged to their grandfather, symbol of family honor." Hashkanaba approached Elizabeth, speaking through Jiu. "Challenge accepted. 3 tests for Gojo. If he fails, you must leave." Elizabeth's heart pounded. "And if I refuse this challenge?" Jiu's expression hardened. "Then you proved Sei right, that you bring division, not unity." The first test began immediately, a race along treacherous canyon paths. Elizabeth watched from the mesa edge as Gojo and Sei sprinted across landscape that seemed impassable, leaping crevices and scaling rock faces with startling agility. Gojo was fastest before his injuries, Jiu commented. Wound from white soldiers, never fully healed. Despite this, Gojo maintained pace with the younger Tsei, finishing just moments behind him. The tribe murmured, an impressive showing despite his loss. The second test involved tracking. Both warriors were blindfolded and had to follow a path marked only by scent and sound, finding objects hidden by the elders. Here, Gojo's experience prevailed, his movements sure while Sei faltered. As afternoon shadows lengthened, the final test began, combat with staffs. Elizabeth clenched her fists as the men circled each other, wooden poles whistling through air. "Is this to the death?" she asked, horrified. Ziu shook her head. First blood or surrender. The fight was brutal but beautiful, a deadly dance of skill and strategy. Tsei possessed youth and rage, his strikes powerful and swift. Gojo moved with economy and precision, his experience evident in each calculated step. When Sei's staff caught Gojo's shoulder with crushing force, Elizabeth gasped. But Gojo merely shifted stance, absorbing the pain without sound. His counterstrike swept Sei's legs from beneath him, sending the younger warrior crashing to the ground. Gojo placed his staff against Sei's throat, victory his for the taking. The crowd held collective breath. Instead of pressing advantage, Gojo stepped back, offering his hand. "He shows mercy," Jiu whispered, surprise evident in her voice. Sei hesitated, then grasped the offered hand, allowing Gojo to pull him to his feet. Words passed between them, too quiet for others to hear. Sei's posture remained stiff, but he nodded curtly before walking away, the obsidian knife now tucked in Gojo's belt. That evening, as Elizabeth helped prepare the communal meal, she noticed the difference in how women regarded her, with cautious respect rather than suspicion. Gojo's victory had changed something fundamental in her status. Later, Gojo found her by the cooking fire. "You watched today," he said. "You understand?" "You fought for me," Elizabeth replied. "For us." He touched the obsidian knife at his belt. "For future, for new way." A sudden wave of dizziness washed over Elizabeth. She steadied herself against a post, her face paling. "Elizabeth!" Alarm sharpened Gojo's voice. "The baby!" she whispered, her hands cradling her belly, as pain lanced through her. "Something's wrong." Night descended upon the village as Elizabeth's condition worsened. Fever claimed her, painting hectic spots of color on her pale cheeks. Inside the medicine man's dwelling, she lay on a bed of soft furs, her breathing shallow and rapid. Hashke-Naibar moved around her, burning sacred herbs and chanting in a low, rhythmic voice. Gojo's mother, Sani, bathed Elizabeth's forehead with cool water, her weathered face creased with concern. Outside, Gojo paced like a caged mountain lion, stopping only when the medicine man emerged. "Baby fights," Hashke-Naibar said in Apache. "Mother grows weak, spirits are troubled." "What can be done?" Gojo asked, his voice tight with rarely displayed emotion. The old man shook his head. "I have tried old ways. Perhaps new ways needed." Inside, Elizabeth drifted, between consciousness and fevered dreams. Images blurred, William's face, the raiders, the market where Gojo had found her. She mumbled words in English, fragments of memory and fear. During a moment of clarity, she grasped Sani's wrist. "Yarrow," she whispered, "and willow bark." For fever. Sani's eyes widened in recognition. She spoke rapidly to Hashke-Naibar, who nodded thoughtfully. "White woman knows plant medicine," he said when Gojo entered. "She speaks of healing ways like ours." Gojo knelt beside. "Elizabeth, what plants you need?" he asked, his English careful and deliberate. Through parched lips, Elizabeth named herbs her grandmother had taught her to use during pregnancy. Some Hashke-Naibar recognized immediately. Others required translation and clarification. Nijoni, the elderly healer, was summoned. She arrived carrying a deerskin bag filled with dried plants, roots, and berries. Working alongside the medicine man, she prepared a sacred herbs bundle, combining Apache healing traditions with Elizabeth's knowledge. "Both ways," Gojo said, watching the collaboration with cautious hope. "Stronger together." Throughout the night, they administered teas brewed from the herbs bundle. Gojo refused to leave, maintaining silent vigil in the corner of the dwelling. When others suggested he rest, he simply shook his head. By dawn, Elizabeth's fever had peaked. She thrashed against the furs, calling out in her delirium. The baby moved violently within her, visible ripples across her swollen belly. Hashke-Naibar began a sacred song, his voice rising and falling like wind through canyon walls. Gojo joined him, their voices twining together in harmonies, passed down through generations. The sun cleared the eastern mesa when Elizabeth finally stilled, her breathing deepening into the rhythm of natural sleep. Nijoni placed a hand on her belly and nodded with satisfaction. "Child at peace now," she announced. "Mother also." The village women who had gathered outside during the crisis murmured in relief. Even Nayenesgani, standing at the edge of the group, showed grudging concern. "She fights like Apache," one woman commented. "Strong spirit." Inside, as Elizabeth slept, Gojo finally succumbed to exhaustion. He dreamed of running through endless canyons, following a white deer that always remained just ahead. When the deer finally turned to face him, it had Elizabeth's eyes. He woke to find Elizabeth watching him, her gaze clear for the first time. "In ours, you stayed," she said simply. "Always," he replied without hesitation. Sani entered with a fresh herbs bundle, smaller than the first, but adorned with protective symbols. She placed it beside Elizabeth's pillow. "Keep close," she instructed. "Good medicine." Later, when Elizabeth was able to sit up and take broth, the village children brought small gifts: a perfect feather, a polished stone, a tiny clay figure, each offering placed reverently beside her bed. "Why?" Elizabeth asked Gojo. "You walk between worlds now," he explained, "between living and spirit. Such journey earns respect." That night, as stars appeared above the village, Elizabeth and Gojo shared a dream neither would speak of until much later. A dream of a child, with Elizabeth's eyes and Gojo's spirit. Standing at the junction of two rivers, arms outstretched toward both banks. 2 weeks after Elizabeth's recovery, supplies ran low in the village. Gojo, as one of the few Apache trusted by white traders, prepared to visit the border town of Cordova for necessities. "I come with you," Elizabeth announced as he packed trade goods, intricately woven baskets, cured deerskins, and turquoise jewelry. Gojo frowned. "Not safe. Your belly grows. Town people not understand." "Precisely. Why I should go," she countered. "Let them see me healthy and choosing to be here. It might prevent trouble later." Though reluctant, Gojo recognized the wisdom in her words. They departed at dawn, Elizabeth now comfortable on horseback, despite her advancing pregnancy. The journey to Cordova took most of the day, giving Elizabeth time to practice the trading phrases Gojo taught her. As the adobe buildings of Cordova appeared on the horizon, Gojo grew watchful, his posture alert to potential danger. They entered town as afternoon shadows lengthened, drawing immediate attention. White women pulled children close, men's hands drifted to gun belts. "Hold your head high," Gojo murmured. "Show no fear." They dismounted outside the general store. The owner MacDougall emerged, surprise evident on his weathered face when he recognized Elizabeth. "Ma'am," he said cautiously, "you're with the Apache willingly?" "I am," Elizabeth replied with calm dignity. "This is Gojo. We've come to trade." MacDougall's gaze lingered on her pregnant belly before shifting to Gojo. Years of pragmatic business dealings with the Apache overrode his initial shock. He nodded and held the door open. Inside, Elizabeth helped negotiate exchanges while curious onlookers pretended to shop. Their whispers reached her ears, Stockholm Syndrome and Savage's woman among the kinder comments. As Gojo loaded their purchases, Elizabeth noticed something tacked to the town bulletin board. Her blood chilled. A crude drawing of her. Imvase stared back, beneath bold letters proclaiming, "Kidnapped by savages. Elizabeth Thornton, teacher's wife. Reward for information." "Gojo," she called softly, gesturing toward the poster. His expression remained impassive, but tension radiated from his shoulders. "We finish quickly," he said. "Go soon." Before they could leave, the town marshal approached, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Mrs. Thornton, your brother-in-law's been searching for you. Claims you were taken against your will." "James?" Elizabeth's surprise was genuine. "He's here?" "Posted those rewards 3 towns over," the marshal continued. "Said Apaches raided your wagon train, killed your husband. There was a raid," Elizabeth confirmed, "but it wasn't Apache, and I wasn't kidnapped. Gojo saved me from being sold at market." The marshal's skeptical gaze traveled between them. "And now you're what, playing house with him?" Elizabeth straightened. "I'm building a new life, by choice." Their exchange drew a crowd. Among the onlookers, Elizabeth noticed hard-faced men watching with particular interest. Bounty hunters. She guessed, attracted by the reward. "Marshal," one called out, "you ain't believing this, are you? Everyone knows Indians brainwash captives." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering crowd. "I can speak for myself," Elizabeth said firmly, "and I'm leaving with my husband." The word husband sent a fresh wave of muttering through the crowd. The marshal's hand hovered near his pistol. "Step away from the Indian, ma'am," he said, "for your own protection." "No." Elizabeth moved closer to Gojo instead. "We're leaving. Now." Tension crackled in the air like lightning before a storm. Gojo slowly raised his empty hands, his voice low but carrying. "No trouble today. We go peacefully." MacDougall, seeing potential violence that would disrupt his business, intervened. "Let them be, Marshal. Woman's made her choice, strange as it might be." The Marshal hesitated, then stepped aside with obvious reluctance. "Your brother-in-law's gathering a militia," he warned. "Says he's going to rescue you and all other white captives. I'd watch my back if I were you." As they rode out of town, Elizabeth felt eyes following their departure. Gojo set a faster pace than their arrival, taking unexpected turns and backtracking to confuse any potential pursuit. "James," Elizabeth whispered. "I never thought he'd come looking for me." Gojo's expression was grim. "Not for you," he said. "For something else." Their return to the village brought somber council meetings. The threat of militia action concerned the elders, particularly with winter approaching, a vulnerable time for the tribe. "We said husband in town," Gojo told Elizabeth after one such meeting. "Words have power. Must be true words." Elizabeth understood his meaning immediately. "You want us to marry, properly marry, by Apache custom." He nodded, watching her reaction carefully. "Protect you, protect child, make place in tribe certain." The practical reasons made sense, but Elizabeth recognized something deeper in his eyes, something neither of them had acknowledged aloud. "Yes," she said simply. Preparations began immediately. Hashke-Naba explained that Gojo must first complete a vision quest, seeking spiritual blessing for their union. He departed before dawn, carrying only water and the obsidian knife, climbing to a sacred mesa where ancestors' spirits were said to dwell. Meanwhile, the women of the tribe, now including many who had initially shunned Elizabeth, began crafting a wedding blanket. Elizabeth watched in awe as they worked, their nimble fingers creating intricate patterns that told stories of both peoples. "These are white symbols," she observed, pointing to unfamiliar designs. Sani nodded. "From old ones who traded with your people long ago, 2 worlds in one blanket," Elizabeth asked to contribute, though her weaving skills were rudimentary. They allowed her to add a simple pattern from her grandmother's quilts, interlinked circles representing eternal bonds. On the quest's 4th day, Gojo returned, his face leaner but peaceful. He spoke privately with Hashke-Naba before seeking Elizabeth. "Spirits give blessing," he told her. "Tomorrow we join." That night, Elizabeth couldn't sleep. Outside her wickiup, she found Ju waiting. "I bring something," Gojo's sister said, holding out a small pouch. Inside was a beaded hair ornament. "From my grandmother, for bride." Elizabeth blinked back tears at this unexpected gesture. "Thank you. I have nothing to give in return." "You give brother peace," Ju replied. Enough! Dawn brought a day unlike any Elizabeth had imagined for herself. The women bathed her in heated water, infused with fragrant herbs, painted traditional symbols on her arms, and dressed her in deerskin garments, softer than any fabric she'd known. "I want to include something from my traditions too," Elizabeth told them. She hummed an old wedding hymn as they worked, teaching them the chorus until their voices blended in harmony. When they led her to the ceremonial circle, the entire tribe had gathered. Even those who disapproved seemed to recognize the historical significance of the moment. At the circle's center stood Gojo, magnificent in ceremonial attire, eagle feathers adorning his hair. Hashke-Naba began the ceremony with prayers to the 4 directions. Elizabeth followed Sani's subtle guidance, mimicking the proper responses and gestures. When Gojo extended his hands, she placed hers atop his, palms down as was custom. The wedding blanket appeared, carried by 4 young girls. It represented their shared future, a home they would build together. With gentle reverence, the elders wrapped it around their shoulders, binding them physically as they would soon be bound spiritually. "New words now," Gojo whispered. Elizabeth cleared her throat. "In my tradition, we exchange promises." She spoke the vows she'd once made to William, but they felt entirely new in this context. A pledge of loyalty, respect, and companionship. Gojo's response came in Apache, then English. "Your path is my path. Your fire, my fire, until stars fall from sky." The ceremonial fire was lit, sacred herbs cast upon the flames. As smoke rose toward the heavens, they circled it 4 times, completing the ancient ritual. That evening, a feast celebrated their union. Children performed traditional dances. Elders shared stories of legendary Apache marriages. Elizabeth felt a belonging she'd thought forever lost after the raid. As night deepened, they retired to Gojo's dwelling, now theirs. The wedding blanket lay across the sleeping mat, its woven symbols illuminated by firelight. "Not how you imagined," Gojo said, a rare uncertainty in his voice. Elizabeth touched the blanket's intricate patterns, Apache designs interwoven with symbols from her world. No, she agreed. It's something entirely new, something better. Married. Life brought Elizabeth unexpected contentment. Each day deepened her integration into tribal life, improving her Apache language skills, contributing to communal work, and preparing for her child's arrival. Gojo proved a thoughtful husband, neither demanding nor distant, allowing their relationship to develop naturally. Winter settled over the canyon lands, bringing shorter days and crystalline nights. The tribe moved to more sheltered dwellings, nestled against cliff walls where ancient pictographs kept silent watch over their descendants. 3 weeks after the wedding ceremony, a scout named Dakea galloped into the winter camp, his horse lathered despite the cold. The tribal council gathered immediately as he delivered his report, gesturing urgently toward the eastern passes. Elizabeth sat with the women, watching the men's faces grow increasingly grave. When the meeting concluded, Gojo sought her. Out his expression troubled. "What's happened?" she asked. "Militia forms in Cordova," he replied. "Many men with guns. Your brother-in-law leads them." Elizabeth's hand moved protectively to her 8-month belly. "Are they coming here?" "Scout. Says they gather supplies, speak of rescuing captives from many tribes." He met her eyes directly. "They will come when snow melts from passes." That evening another visitor arrived, a messenger from the neighboring Navajo tribe. He carried a broken peace pipe, its shaft deliberately snapped in half. "What does it mean?" Elizabeth asked as Gojo examined the artifact. "Warning," he explained. "They know of militia too. Send warning, but refuse alliance." "Why refuse to help?" Gojo's expression darkened. "Messenger says Navajo will not stand with tribe of the white woman. Your presence divides possible alliances." The tribal council debated through the night. Some elders advocated abandoning the winter camp, moving deeper into canyon lands where militia horses couldn't follow. Others argued for sending warriors to ambush the militia before they reached tribal lands. Elizabeth listened from the shadows, understanding more of the Apache language with each passing day. When Sei suggested using her as bait to trap the militia, her blood ran cold. "No," Gojo's voice cut through the debate. "She is tribe now, protected as any Apache." "Your white wife brings this danger," an elder countered. "Perhaps returning her would satisfy these men." Elizabeth stepped forward into the firelight. "May I speak?" Surprise rippled through the council. Women rarely address such gatherings. Hashke Nabar studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I know these men," Elizabeth said in careful Apache. "They do not want me. They want your land, your horses, your freedom." She switched to English, which Gojo translated. "My brother-in-law James covets what others possess. He uses rescue as excuse for taking." The council listened, weighing her words. "I believe we should stand our ground," she continued. "Not in battle, but in unity. Show strength that makes them hesitate." The council remained divided, but Elizabeth's willingness to stand with them shifted something in the room. Even those who distrusted her recognized her commitment to their survival. As dawn approached, decisions were made. Warriors would not seek conflict, but would prepare defenses. Women and children would remain ready to retreat deeper into the canyons if necessary. Scouts would monitor the militia's movements. After the council dispersed, Elizabeth helped the women prepare traveling packs with emergency supplies. While working, she noticed Nijoni methodically sorting healing herbs. "Teaching you," the elderly healer announced, motioning Elizabeth closer. "For when fighting comes." Together they created medicine bundles, some for pain, others for fever, many for treating wounds. Elizabeth added techniques from her own knowledge, and Nijoni nodded approval at each suggestion. That night, Elizabeth found Gojo outside their dwelling, staring at the stars. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly. "Not of fighting," he replied. "Of losing what we build." Elizabeth leaned against his shoulder. "What happens if they come in full force?" Gojo was silent for a long moment. Many will die, on both sides. There must be another way, Elizabeth whispered. His hand found hers in the darkness. Perhaps we find together. A lone rider appeared on the ridge above the winter camp 2 days later. He carried no weapons visible and held a white cloth. Aloft, the settler symbol for peaceful approach. Warriors moved into defensive positions, while Gojo and 2 tribal elders went to meet the visitor. Elizabeth watched from the camp's edge, her heart hammering when she recognized the distant figure. "James," she whispered. Her brother-in-law had aged since she'd last seen him. New lines etched around his mouth, his once auburn hair now streaked with grey. As the Apache escorted him into camp, his searching gaze found Elizabeth immediately. "Elizabeth," he called, moving toward her until warriors blocked his path. "Thank God you're alive." Gojo positioned himself between them, his stance protective without being threatening. "Why you come alone?" he asked in English. "To negotiate," James replied, his attention still fixed on Elizabeth. "And to see my brother's wife, with my own eyes." The council convened, with James seated as an honored but watched guest. Elizabeth joined them at Hashke Nayabar's request, unusual for a woman, but necessary given her connection to the visitor. "The territorial governor sent me," James began, his merchant's eloquence evident. "He offers protected land farther west, in exchange for peaceful relocation. Protected until more white men want it," Tsei countered. James spread his hands. "I come with authority to make binding agreements. No one wants bloodshed." While the council deliberated this unexpected proposal, Sani insisted that hospitality traditions be observed. A meal was prepared, with Elizabeth helping serve the visitor. "You look well," James said when they were momentarily alone. "Considering." "I am well," Elizabeth replied. "This is my home now." James reached into his pocket, producing a tarnished silver pocket watch. "Williams, I thought you might want it." Elizabeth accepted the timepiece with trembling fingers, her husband's prized possession, the one he'd supposedly been buried with. "How did you get this?" she asked. "Found it after the raid," James said, smoothly. "Kept it, hoping to return it someday." Elizabeth studied him, remembering William's stories about his opportunistic younger brother. "What do you really want, James?" His smile faltered. "To save you from these savages." "They're not savages," she corrected firmly, "and I don't need saving." The evening meal proceeded with formal politeness. James observed every interaction between Elizabeth and Gojo, noting their easy communication and mutual respect. "You actually care for him," James said later, sounding genuinely surprised. "I do," Elizabeth replied simply. James lowered his voice. "There's something you should know. Your father died last spring. His property in Pennsylvania. It's yours now, a substantial inheritance, Elizabeth. You could have a proper life again." The revelation struck like lightning. Her father, gone. And the inheritance explained much about James's sudden interest in her welfare. "How convenient that you found me just when there's money involved," she observed. "It's not like that," James protested, though his eyes shifted away. "As William's widow, your family. I've been searching for months." Before Elizabeth could respond, Gojo approached, carrying a clay cup of ceremonial tea. He offered it to James with formal dignity. "In my tradition," James said, accepting the cup, "we toast to successful negotiations." The conversation shifted back to the proposed relocation. James outlined generous terms, guaranteed hunting rights, government supplies, protection from settlers. Terms too generous to be sincere. As moonlight replaced firelight, James was given a separate dwelling for the night. Elizabeth sat with Gojo outside their home, William's pocket watch heavy in her hand. "He lies," Gojo said simply. "Yes," Elizabeth agreed, "but why come alone? Why this charade? To see our strength, our weaknesses." Gojo's fingers traced the watch's engraved surface. "To find you." Elizabeth closed her eyes, sudden understanding washing over her. "The inheritance requires my signature. He needs me alive and cooperative." "What you want to do?" Gojo asked, his voice carefully neutral. Elizabeth tucked the watch into her dress pocket. A connection to her past, but not a tether. We listen, she said. We learn what we can, and we prepare for what comes after he leaves. James departed the following morning with Apache escorts to guide him safely back to the eastern trails. Elizabeth watched him go, William's pocket watch weighing heavy in her hand. Despite their differences, James was her last connection to her former life. He returns to militia, Gojo stated. Not a question, but a certainty. Yes, Elizabeth agreed. We should prepare. 3 days passed in vigilant calm. Scouts reported James's return to Cordova, where militia numbers had grown. Elizabeth threw herself into preparations, helping Nijoni prepare medicinal supplies, teaching women basic treatment for gunshot wounds, and practicing emergency evacuation routes with the children. On the fourth dawn, chaos erupted. Riders! The sentry's cry shattered the morning stillness. Many riders from east, Elizabeth emerged from their dwelling to see warriors rushing to defensive positions. Mothers gathered children, elders collected essential supplies. The evacuation plan they'd rehearsed was now urgent reality. Gojo appeared at her side, bow in hand. Go with women and children, he ordered, to High Canyon. Before she could protest, gunfire crackled from the eastern ridge. Militia riders poured into the valley, James visible among their leaders. At least 30 armed men, some in civilian clothes, others in partial military uniforms. They were waiting for the scouts to return, Elizabeth realized. They followed them back. Gojo pushed her toward the escape route. Go now. Reluctantly, Elizabeth joined the evacuation group, helping a mother with twin infants. They'd barely reached the hidden trail when riders appeared, cutting off their escape. Someone had betrayed the evacuation route. Back to camp! Elizabeth shouted, redirecting the group. They returned to find the settlement in flames. Warriors fought desperately, outnumbered and outgunned. Elizabeth spotted Hashke Nabar fallen near the council fire, his ancient face still in death. Screams and gunshots filled the air as Elizabeth guided her group behind the stone granary, one of the few structures that wouldn't burn. From this position, she saw James directing militia to search specific dwellings. He's looking for me, she realized. A militiaman discovered their hiding place. Before he could raise his rifle, Sani flung a handful of ash into his eyes. Elizabeth seized the moment, shoving him backward and grabbing his dropped weapon. This way, she called to the women and children, leading them toward the western trail. They'd nearly reached safety when James himself blocked their path. Elizabeth, he called, stop this madness and come with me. She raised the rifle. Let these people pass. James's expression hardened. These savages have corrupted you. Your child deserves civilization, not this primitive life. My child deserves to live, Elizabeth countered, which won't happen if you continue this attack. Their standoff was interrupted by warriors flanking James. He retreated, shouting orders to nearby militiamen. Elizabeth led her group to the western escape route, where Jiu waited to guide them higher into the canyons. I have to find Gojo, Elizabeth told her. My brother fights near river, Jiu replied. Be careful. Elizabeth moved through smoke and chaos, helping wounded where she could. Near the central plaza, she found Sei battling 3 militiamen. Without hesitation, she fired her rifle, wounding one attacker. Sei dispatched the others with efficient skill. He acknowledged her with a nod. Brother seeks you, he said. Near your dwelling. Elizabeth found Gojo engaged in brutal hand-to-hand combat with 2 cavalrymen, not militia but actual soldiers. One lay motionless already. The other swung a cavalry saber that caught Gojo's shoulder, drawing a bright slash of blood. Gojo! She cried out. The distraction nearly proved fatal. The soldier lunged, but Elizabeth's rifle cracked, her bullet finding its mark. The man collapsed, dropping his saber and a single leather glove. Gojo pressed his hand to his bleeding shoulder. You should be gone, he said, though gratitude flickered in his eyes. I couldn't leave you, she replied. All around them the battle was turning. More Apache warriors arrived, hunters returning to defend their home. The militia, facing unexpected resistance, began to retreat. James appeared on horseback, pointing directly at Elizabeth. "There! Get her!" "Time to go," Gojo said grimly, pulling Elizabeth toward their horses. As they mounted, Elizabeth saw James watching, his face contorted with rage and something else. Calculation. This wasn't over. It had barely begun. The survivors traveled through the night, following ancient paths known only to tribal elders. Elizabeth rode behind Gojo, supporting his injured body as he guided their horse through narrow canyon passages. Despite her advanced pregnancy, she remained vigilant, helping tend wounds during brief rest stops. Dawn revealed their destination, a hidden valley nestled between towering red cliffs. Ancient cliff dwellings carved into the rock face centuries ago overlooked a small spring-fed pool. The natural fortress offered protection that would have been impossible to breach without knowledge of the secret access points. Ancestors lived here, Gojo explained as the tribe established camp. Sacred place used only in greatest need. Elizabeth helped organize the survivors. 53 Apache had escaped the massacre, fewer than half their number. The wounded were settled in the lower cliff dwellings, while families claimed spaces higher up the rock face. Grief hung heavy in the air as they accounted for those lost. Nijoni examined Gojo's shoulder wound. "Blade cut deep," she said. "Needs strong." "Medicine?" Elizabeth cleaned the injury with boiled spring water, then applied a poultice of herbs they'd managed to salvage. As she worked, she noticed Gojo's gaze fixed on a section of cliff wall near their dwelling. "What is it?" she asked. "Ancient. Markings," he replied. "Stories of before time. When his wound was dressed, they approached the wall together. Faded red and ochre pictographs covered the smooth rock surface. Handprints, spirals, animal forms, and human figures engaged in hunting and ceremonial activities. Elizabeth traced her fingers over one curious image. A pale figure standing between two groups of people, arms outstretched toward both sides. "Like you," Gojo observed, "between worlds." Hashke Nabar's apprentice, a young man named Nilchii who now bore the medicine man's responsibilities, approached them. "You found it," he said, his voice solemn. "Found what?" Elizabeth asked. "The hour and prophecy." Nilchii pointed to the pale figure. "The one who brings change, the pale mother of dawn." Elizabeth stared at the ancient pictograph. "This can't be about me. These drawings are hundreds of years old." "Prophecy doesn't follow time, like footprints," Nilchii explained. "It walks beside time, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind." That evening, a tribal council convened, smaller now, missing beloved elders who had fallen. They gathered in the largest, in cliff dwelling, where ancestral handprints decorated the ceiling like stars. "We must seek alliance with Navajo," one warrior argued. "Militia will find us eventually." "Navajo refused before," another countered. "Why would they help now?" "Because now we have proof of white men's treachery," Tsei said. "James came under peace banner, then attacked. Even Navajo respect honor." The debate continued until Nilchii raised his hand for silence. "The pale mother stands among us," he said, gesturing to Elizabeth. "The prophecy speaks of her child. When the pale mother's child cries its first breath beneath the lightning sky, old hatreds will wash away like desert sand in rain." The council turned to Elizabeth, who instinctively protected her belly with both hands. "My child is not a symbol," she said firmly. "Just a baby who deserves safety." Gojo placed his hand over hers. "Child can be both," he said gently. "Symbol and child, like you are both Elizabeth and wife of Gojo." Over the following days, Elizabeth observed how completely her status had transformed. Women who had once shunned her now sought her guidance. Children brought her small treasures found in the ancient dwellings. Even Tsei, once her fiercest opponent, consulted her about strategies for dealing with the militia. "You fought well," he told her. "Like Apache." "I fought for my family," she corrected. "Like any woman would." Elizabeth spent hours exploring the cliff dwellings, discovering pottery shards and discarded tools from ancient inhabitants. In the deepest chamber, she found handprints on the wall, a woman's and a child's side by side. On the seventh night in the hidden valley, Elizabeth jolted awake from a vivid dream. In it, she had stood on a mesa top, lightning striking all around her as she held a newborn child. On one side stood Apache warriors, on the other, white settlers. The child's cry had silenced the thunder itself. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby's shift within. "Not yet," she whispered. "We have work to do first." 2 weeks passed in the hidden valley. Scouts reported militia activity throughout the territory, searching homesteads, questioning travelers, offering rewards for information about Apache captives. The militia had established a base camp near the burned village, suggesting they hadn't abandoned their pursuit. More surprising was the news brought by a Navajo messenger. After learning of James's treachery, neighboring tribes had convened their own council. They now offered limited alliance, not friendship, but mutual defense against the common threat. "Militia attacks Navajo hunting party yesterday," the messenger explained. "Take 2 women captive, claiming to rescue them." This development prompted a war council unlike any in tribal memory. Representatives from 3 Apache bands and 2 Navajo clans gathered in the ancient ceremonial space. Elizabeth, heavy with child and days from delivery, sat beside Gojo as an equal voice, unprecedented for a woman, much less a white woman. As warriors debated strategy, ambushes, raids, direct confrontation, Elizabeth studied their faces. Young men hungry for battle, older warriors cautious from experience, mothers and sisters fearing more loss. "There must be another way," she said when discussion reached a lull. "Fighting alone will only bring more soldiers." "What you suggest?" asked the Navajo headman skeptically. Elizabeth rose with effort, her pregnancy making movement cumbersome. "The territorial governor doesn't know what James has done. The militia acts without official sanction." "How you know this?" someone called. "Because real cavalry would have finished what the militia started," she replied bluntly. "They would have brought cannons, more men. This is James's personal vendetta dressed as rescue." She gestured for Gojo to unroll a deerskin map one of the warriors had drawn, showing settlements, military outposts, and tribal lands throughout the territory. "We need to tell our story to someone with authority," she continued. "Someone who can stop the militia legally. White men don't listen to Apache," Tsei argued. "They might listen to me," Elizabeth countered. "A white woman freely living among you, carrying a child, speaking of peace." Skeptical murmurs rippled through the gathering. "Before I was captured," she pressed on, "I knew people with influence. A missionary in the territorial capital who advised the governor on Indian affairs. If I could speak with him, show him the truth of our situation." "Too dangerous," Gojo interrupted. "Capital crawling with militia. James would find you, which is exactly why they won't expect it," Elizabeth argued, "and why it must be me who goes." The debate continued into the night. Elizabeth's plan slowly gained support, not through force of argument, but through lack of better alternatives. Direct conflict would bring the full might of the U.S. Army. Hiding couldn't last forever. Diplomatic engagement offered a slim hope worth pursuing. By dawn, a compromise emerged. Elizabeth would travel to the territorial capital with Gojo and a small escort of warriors skilled in moving unseen through settler territory. They would seek audience with the governor through Elizabeth's missionary contact. Meanwhile, the allied tribes would prepare defenses in case the diplomatic mission failed. As the council dispersed, Elizabeth supervised preparation of travel supplies. Nijoni approached with medicines specially prepared for the journey. "For pain," she explained, handing Elizabeth small pouches. "For bleeding. For fever." She hesitated, then added, "For birth." Elizabeth stared at the last pouch. "I should deliver before we leave." Nijoni shook her head. "Baby comes when spirits call, not when mother plans." That evening, Elizabeth found Gojo outside their cliff dwelling, instructing young warriors on settler customs they might encounter. When they finished, he unfolded a large piece of deerskin onto which he had charcoal sketched their planned route. 4 days to capital, he explained, tracing the path. Avoid main trails, travel night, hide day. Elizabeth studied the map, memorizing key landmarks. If we fail, then we fight, he said simply. But first, we try your way. As moonlight washed over the ancient cliff dwellings, Elizabeth practiced what she would say to the governor, arguments honed from her teaching days, appeals to law and human decency. She had known educated men, had moved in circles where reason prevailed over prejudice. Whether such men existed in territorial politics remained to be seen. It will work, she whispered to her unborn child. It must work. They traveled under moonlight, following game trails and dry washes to avoid detection. Elizabeth rode double with Gojo, her advanced pregnancy making each mile increasingly uncomfortable. 4 warriors accompanied them, Tsei among them, his presence a surprising vote of confidence in their mission. 2 days into their journey, they passed the burned remains of their village. Elizabeth felt Gojo's body tense as they surveyed the destruction. Blackened wickiup frames stood like skeletal sentinels against the sunset. We rebuild someday, he said softly, stronger than before. By the 3rd day, they reached more populated areas where concealment became crucial. They skirted settlements, using arroyos and tree lines for cover. Elizabeth's back ached constantly, and strange sensations rippled across her belly. Baby prepares, Nijoni had warned before, their departure. Listen to body signals. Near dusk, they spotted the territorial capital in the valley below, a sprawling adobe settlement surrounding government buildings of imported red brick. Military barracks stood at the eastern edge, cavalry horses visible in corrals. How we enter? Tsei asked. Guards at every road. Elizabeth had anticipated this. Supply wagons, she said, pointing to a line of vehicles entering the western gate. They'll be checked, but not searched thoroughly. Gojo studied the pattern of wagon traffic. Too risky for all. I go with Elizabeth only. Others wait here as backup. Tsei protested, but eventually conceded the logic. A smaller group would attract less attention. They approached a farmer's wagon laden with vegetables. Elizabeth adopted the posture of a weary settler wife, while Gojo reluctantly removed his Apache adornments, looking uncomfortable in borrowed settler clothing. Help us reach the mission house, Elizabeth asked the farmer, fabricating a story of raiders and a desperate journey. My husband and I seek Reverend Caldwell. The farmer, moved by the sight of Elizabeth's pregnancy, agreed. Keep your heads down, he advised, helping them hide among sacks of corn and squash. The wagon passed through the gates with minimal inspection. Once inside the town, they slipped away, making their way through side streets toward the mission compound. Reverend Caldwell's adobe mission stood near the governor's residence, a calculated location for a man dedicated to influencing Indian policy. Elizabeth approached the gate alone, leaving Gojo hidden in shadows. The elderly missionary didn't recognize her at first. Her skin sun-darkened, her bearing transformed by months among the Apache. When understanding dawned, his reaction wasn't what she'd expected. Elizabeth Thornton, he gasped. My dear, your brother-in-law has the entire territory searching for you. She pressed a finger to her lips. Please, I need your help. The story being told is false. Inside Caldwell's study, Elizabeth explained everything. The raid that wasn't Apache, her rescue by Gojo, the peaceful life interrupted by James's militia, and the massacre of innocents. James claims you're suffering from captivity delusion, Caldwell said, that the savages have brainwashed you. See for yourself, Elizabeth replied, summoning Gojo from where he waited. The Reverend's eyes widened at the dignified Apache who entered his study. The 2 men regarded each other with cautious respect. You've married? Caldwell asked, noting their body language. According to Apache custom, yes, Elizabeth confirmed. But that's not why we've come. James is raising a private army, attacking peaceful villages under pretense of rescue. The governor must intervene before more die on both sides. Caldwell paced, troubled. Governor Harrison has authorized militia support for recovering captives. If what you say is true, I have proof, Elizabeth insisted. She produced a letter found on a dead militiaman, orders from James mentioning land claims in Apache territory once the savages were removed. The Reverend studied the document, then made his decision. I'll arrange an audience with the governor, but you need more than my word. He drafted a letter of introduction on official mission stationery. This should get you through his door. As they prepared to leave, Elizabeth felt a sharp pain lance through her abdomen. She gripped the doorframe, breathing deeply until it passed. The baby? Gojo asked quietly. Just practice pains, she assured him, though uncertainty shadowed her eyes. We have time. Caldwell watched their exchange with fascination. I've spent 30 years trying to build understanding between peoples, he mused. Perhaps I've been doing it wrong all along. As darkness fell, they left the mission with Caldwell's letter and directions to the governor's residence. The Reverend's parting words followed them into the night. Whatever happens, he said, your child will be born into a world that needs its existence. Their meeting with Governor Harrison proved both promising and frustrating. Though visibly shocked by Elizabeth's voluntary presence with an Apache warrior, the governor listened to their account with measured attention. These are serious allegations. Against respected citizens, he said finally. I'll need time to investigate. People are dying while you investigate, Elizabeth countered, wincing as another pain gripped her belly. The contractions were coming more frequently now, though she hid her discomfort. The governor noticed her pallor. Mrs. Thornton, are you unwell? We've traveled far, Gojo interjected smoothly. Wife needs rest. Harrison studied them, political calculation evident in his eyes. Return tomorrow, he decided. I'll have my secretary review militia authorizations. Outside, Elizabeth stumbled against Gojo. The baby, she whispered, it's coming. They couldn't risk remaining in town. Elizabeth's condition would raise questions, and James had informants everywhere. With night falling, they slipped through back streets to rejoin their waiting companions. We must return to Hidden Valley, Tsei insisted upon seeing Elizabeth's condition. No time, Gojo replied grimly. Baby comes soon. They rode east, away from settlements, seeking shelter as Elizabeth's pains intensified. A summer thunderstorm gathered on the horizon, massive clouds building like mountains in the darkening sky. There, Tsei pointed toward a sandstone formation. Cave in those rocks, the shallow cave offered protection from the coming storm. While warriors stood guard, Gojo helped Elizabeth dismount, her face contorted with another contraction. Remember Nijoni's teachings, he encouraged, laying out the birthing supplies they'd brought. Elizabeth nodded through her pain. And my grandmother's, she gasped. Between us, we know what to do. The storm arrived with spectacular fury, lightning shattering the darkness as thunder echoed through canyon walls. Rain fell in blinding sheets outside their shelter. Inside, a more elemental force was building. Elizabeth labored through the night, drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Gojo remained steadfast beside her, supporting her body during contractions, offering water between pains, whispering encouragement. Near the center of the cave floor lay smooth, rounded stones, ancient tools left by previous inhabitants. They're perfectly shaped for a laboring woman to grip. Elizabeth clutched these birthing stones, their cool surfaces warming in her hands as her body worked to bring new life into the world. Ancestors' help, Gojo murmured, recognizing the stones' purpose. They'd prepare this place long ago. Dawn approached, though the storm's darkness obscured its coming. Elizabeth entered the final stage of labor, her strength nearly exhausted. I can't, she whispered after a particularly grueling contraction. Gojo wiped her brow with a damp cloth. "You can," he insisted. "You strong like mountain, enduring. Like river." Elizabeth gathered her remaining strength, bearing down with primal force. Outside, lightning struck a nearby mesa with blinding brilliance, thunder crashing instantaneously. In that same moment, their child entered the world. "A daughter," Gojo announced, his voice thick with emotion as he cradled the tiny, perfect being. "Beautiful daughter." The newborn's cry rose clear and strong, precisely as the storm began to subside. Sunlight suddenly pierced the clouds, casting a rainbow across the rain-soaked landscape. "Naotsuse," Gojo whispered, placing their daughter on Elizabeth's chest. "Rainbow after storm. Hope," Elizabeth added, tears mingling with sweat on her cheeks. "Her English name will be Hope." The warriors outside, having maintained respectful distance during the birth, now approached with reverent steps. Teye, who had once been Elizabeth's fiercest opponent, knelt beside them. "Child of prophecy," he said softly, "born when lightning speaks and sky makes peace with earth." The news of the birth spread through mysterious channels, traveling faster than any human messenger could ride. In Apache camps, elders spoke of signs and dreams, a child born during lightning, bridging two worlds. In settler communities, rumors circulated of a white woman who had given birth among savages, yet lived to tell the tale. By sunset, Elizabeth sat at the cave entrance, her daughter swaddled against her breast. The storm had cleansed the landscape, leaving the desert vibrant with life and color. Gojo joined her, his hand gently brushing their daughter's downy head. "She has your eyes," he observed, "clear like morning sky." "And your spirit," Elizabeth replied, "strong and peaceful both." In silent agreement, they decided to remain at the cave another day, allowing Elizabeth to regain strength before the journey home. The birthing stones were arranged in a protective circle around their sleeping space, a connection to the women who had labored in this same spot across countless generations. "Tomorrow," Elizabeth said, watching the first stars appear, "we finish what we started." 3 days after Hope's birth, they approached the site of their burned village. Elizabeth rode with her daughter secured to her chest in a makeshift cradleboard, its wooden frame adorned with symbols from both cultures. Apache protection signs beside tiny crosses Elizabeth had carved. They crested a ridge and froze at the site below. A cavalry detachment had established camp near the village ruins. Nearby, a militia encampment sprawled in disarray, James's men evidently. "They argue," Teye observed, noting the separate camps and tense postures of men moving between them. Through Reverend Caldwell's spyglass, borrowed during their visit, Elizabeth could see uniformed cavalry officers gesturing angrily at militia leaders. James stood among them, his stance defiant. "The governor sent the cavalry," she realized. "He's investigating just as he promised." As they watched, Apache riders appeared from the western canyon, warriors from their hidden valley, come to assess the situation. The cavalry noticed them immediately, forming defensive positions. "We must go down," Elizabeth said, "before blood is shed." Gojo nodded grimly. Together, they descended the slope in plain sight, Elizabeth and Hope in the center of their small group. The cavalry commander spotted them, barking orders to hold fire. James, however, raised his rifle until a soldier knocked it aside. "I am Captain Reeves, Arizona Territory Cavalry," the commander announced as they approached. "Identify yourselves." Elizabeth moved forward. "I am Elizabeth Thornton, and this is my husband Gojo. We spoke with Governor Harrison 3 days ago." The captain's eyes widened in recognition. "Mrs. Thornton, the governor said you might return." His gaze fell to the infant at her breast. "I see your condition has changed." "My daughter, Hope Naotsuse," Elizabeth said proudly. "Born during the thunderstorm." James pushed past the soldiers. "Elizabeth, thank God. We'll get you proper medical attention." "I need no rescue, James," she interrupted coldly, "as I've been telling everyone who would listen." Captain Reeves held up a document bearing the governor's seal. I have orders to investigate claims of unauthorized militia action against peaceful Indians. These men claim they're rescuing captives, yet I've found none who wish to be rescued. Because they've been brainwashed, James shouted. Look at her, living like a savage, dressed in heathen clothes. I've made my choice freely, Elizabeth stated, as have other women you claim to rescue. The Apache warriors from the hidden valley had drawn closer during this exchange. Elizabeth signaled them to hold position as she dismounted, approaching the cavalry commander with her newborn daughter. Captain, this conflict was manufactured by my brother-in-law to seize Apache lands, she explained. I have evidence of his plans. She produced the militia orders they'd recovered, along with James's letters found in the aftermath of the attack. As Reeves examined the documents, Hope began to fuss. Elizabeth instinctively loosened the cradleboard's wrappings. Around the baby's neck hung a small necklace, two halves of a medallion joined together. One half bore Apache symbols, the other a tiny silver cross. What's this? The captain asked, noticing the necklace. A symbol, Gojo answered in careful English. Two peoples, one future. The captain studied the infant, then looked between Elizabeth and Gojo. Something in his expression shifted, professional duty giving way to human recognition. Stand down, he ordered his men. No one is being rescued today. James lunged forward. This is outrageous. She's my brother's widow. That savage has no right. Actually, Reeves interrupted, I have affidavits from settlers who witnessed your raid. You attacked peaceful Indians under false pretenses. He nodded to his lieutenant. Arrest Mr. Thornton for inciting violence and fraudulent land claims. As soldiers restrained James, he struggled wildly. The inheritance is rightfully mine. She has no claim without my signature. So that's what this was truly about, Elizabeth said, understanding dawning. Not rescuing me, but stealing my father's property. The captain unfolded another document, the governor's decree. By order of Territorial Governor Harrison, the lands between Blackwater Creek and the eastern mesas are designated protected territory for peaceful settlement. He looked directly at Gojo. Your people may return home with military guarantee against further aggression. That evening, as militiamen departed under cavalry escort, Elizabeth sat with Gojo beside the ashes of their former dwelling. Hope slept peacefully in her father's arms, unaware of the history unfolding around her tiny life. We begin again, Gojo said simply. Elizabeth surveyed the ruins, already envisioning what would rise in their place. Yes, she agreed. But this time we build something entirely new. 6 months passed. Spring painted the desert in wildflower blooms as a new settlement took shape where the burned village once stood. Unlike the traditional Apache arrangement, this community integrated elements from both cultures, stone and adobe structures alongside wiki-ups, arranged to maximize shared spaces while respecting privacy. At the center of the settlement stood the cornerstone of what would become Elizabeth's clinic, a foundation stone taken from the cave where Hope was born. Inscribed with symbols from both cultures, it represented the unique healing practice Elizabeth was developing, blending her grandmother's remedies with Apache medicine. Hold still, Elizabeth instructed a young Apache boy as she treated a cut on his arm. This plant helps fight the angry spirits that cause infection. Nearby, Nijoni observed with approval. You explain good. Children understand both ways. Since returning, Elizabeth had worked tirelessly to document her hybrid healing methods. Her small clinic, still under construction, already attracted patients from neighboring settlements, including cautious white families, drawn by stories of the medicine woman who walks between worlds. Outside, Hope, now 6 months old, gurgled happily in a cradleboard watched over by Sunny. The baby showed distinctive features of both parents. Elizabeth's blue eyes and fair skin, Gojo's strong nose and determined expression. Gojo had changed as well. As the settlement grew, incorporating families from 3 Apache bands and even a few mixed heritage couples inspired by their example, he had emerged as a natural mediator. His ability to navigate both Apache traditions and settler expectations made him invaluable in resolving disputes. "The Navajo traders will arrive tomorrow," he told Elizabeth that evening as they shared a quiet meal. "They bring news from territorial capital." Elizabeth nodded, having anticipated this. "And travelers with them, I expect." Governor Harrison had kept his word, maintaining military patrols that discouraged vigilante actions against the settlement. More surprising was the influx of curious visitors, missionaries, journalists, even government officials interested in what some called the Apache experiment. Not all reactions were positive. Traditional elders from distant Apache bands sometimes refused to recognize Gojo's authority. Some settler communities boycotted goods from traders who stopped at the mixed settlement. But these voices grew fainter as the community's success became evident. The following day, Navajo traders arrived with their usual goods: blankets, pottery, and silverwork. Among them traveled an unexpected visitor, Reverend Caldwell. "I had to see for myself," the elderly missionary explained, as Elizabeth welcomed him. "The governor speaks of this place as a model for the territory." Elizabeth showed him around the growing settlement, where Apache women taught settler wives about desert plants, while settler men learned irrigation techniques from tribal farmers. Children played together, already developing a hybrid language of English and Apache words. "Remarkable," Caldwell murmured, watching Hope interact with children of both cultures. "Truly remarkable." "It's not always easy," Elizabeth admitted. "Old fears run deep on both sides, but we're building something that works." That evening, a delegation from a neighboring Apache band arrived, seeking Gojo's help with a boundary dispute. Elizabeth watched with pride as her husband listened carefully to all perspectives before suggesting a compromise that honored traditional claims while acknowledging new realities. Later, as moonlight bathed the settlement, Elizabeth found Gojo sitting outside their home, a structure that combined the circular design of a wickiup with settler-style wooden doors and windows. "You've created something unprecedented here," Caldwell told them, joining their quiet contemplation. "A genuine integration, not domination of one culture over another." "Not me," Gojo corrected, gesturing to where Hope slept peacefully. "Her, the promised child," Elizabeth smiled. "It's more prosaic than prophecy, people working together, finding common ground." "Perhaps prophecy is just truth seen from a distance," Caldwell suggested. Before departing the next morning, Caldwell presented Elizabeth with news from the territorial capital. A journalist had published their story in Eastern newspapers, titled "The Apache's Bride." The article had sparked debate in Washington about Indian policy throughout the territories. "Your experience is changing minds," he told her. "Perhaps not all at once, but gradually." As the Reverend rode away, Elizabeth stood with Gojo at the edge of their growing community. Hope, strapped to her father's back, reached for a butterfly, dancing on the desert breeze. "Do you ever regret it?" Gojo asked quietly. "This life instead of your inheritance?" Elizabeth watched a group of women, Apache and settler alike, raising the walls of a new dwelling, working together with practiced efficiency. "This is my inheritance," she replied, "the one that matters." 5 years passed. The settlement, now known as Harmony Creek to outsiders, and To Witso, Yellow Water to the Apache, had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. What began as an experiment in cultural coexistence had become a thriving community of over 300 people, mostly Apache, but including a growing number of mixed families and even some settlers who preferred the collaborative lifestyle. To the competitive individualism of frontier towns, Elizabeth's clinic had expanded into a proper building where she trained apprentices from both cultures. Her medical journal, documenting the integration of traditional knowledge with modern techniques, was being copied and shared throughout the territory. Gojo, now recognized as a headman by 4 Apache bands, had helped negotiate treaties that protected native lands while allowing controlled development and trade. And Hope, now 5 years old with a 2-year-old brother named William Nilchii, had become the living embodiment of their vision. Fluent in both languages, moving effortlessly between cultures, she was neither fully Apache nor fully white, but something new and vital. The settlement prepared for a significant event, a visit from Washington's Indian Affairs Commissioner coming to observe what territorial officials called the Harmony Creek Model. Elizabeth supervised final preparations in the central meeting ground, where ceremonial demonstrations would showcase the community's achievements. "Mama!" Hope called, running toward her with boundless energy. "Uncle Tseyi says the important man from Washington is coming up the valley." Elizabeth smiled at her daughter's excitement. Hope wore her special dress for the occasion, buckskin adorned with traditional beadwork, but cut in a style reminiscent of settler children's clothing. Around her neck hung a familiar silver medallion, transformed from its original purpose. The medallion that had once purchased Elizabeth at the market had been fashioned into a cradle decoration after Hope's birth. Now split into 2 halves and joined by a silver chain, it had become Hope's most treasured possession, a physical reminder of how something meant for subjugation could be transformed into a symbol of freedom. Gojo joined them, resplendent, in a blend of traditional and adapted clothing that reflected his dual role as Apache leader and cross-cultural diplomat. "Commissioner's party includes 3 military officers," he noted, "and 2 newspaper writers." "Good," Elizabeth replied. "The more who see, the more who understand." The community gathered as the visitors arrived, an impressive procession of government officials, territorial representatives, and military escorts. Commissioner Bradford, a stern-faced man with skeptical eyes, dismounted stiffly. "Mrs. Thornton?" he inquired, using Elizabeth's settler name with deliberate emphasis. "Elizabeth Gojo," she corrected gently. "Welcome to our home." The formal introductions complete, the community showcased what they had built, agricultural innovations that combined Apache dry farming techniques with settler irrigation methods, a school where children learned in both languages, collaborative craft workshops producing goods that had become prized throughout the territory. "Remarkable," Bradford admitted as the tour concluded. "When Governor Harrison described this place, I thought he was exaggerating. It hasn't been without challenges." Elizabeth acknowledged. "We've faced resistance from traditionalists on both sides." "Yet you persisted," the commissioner observed. "We had something worth fighting for," Gojo replied, watching Hope lead younger children in a dance that blended Apache movements with settler music, a spontaneous demonstration of the integration they lived daily. That evening, as the community hosted a feast for their visitors, Elizabeth presented the commissioner with a copy of her journal, 5 years of observations, successes, and failures in building their cross-cultural community. "My records," she explained. "Perhaps they might help others." Bradford leafed through the pages with growing interest. "The Bureau has been searching for approaches that don't require forcible assimilation." He chose his words carefully. "This could inform policy throughout the territories." As sunset painted the mesa gold, Hope climbed onto a platform and began the children's blessing song, an ancient Apache melody with words that now incorporated phrases from both cultures. The clear, pure voice of a child who had never known. Division rang out across the settlement. Commissioner Bradford leaned toward Elizabeth. "Tell me honestly, can this be replicated elsewhere?" Elizabeth watched her daughter leading children from multiple backgrounds in perfect harmony. Beyond them, Gojo stood with tribal elders and settlement leaders, their faces reflecting 5 years of hard-won wisdom. "Not exactly as we've done it," she admitted. "Each community must find its own path. But the principles? Yes. Respect, equality, willingness to learn from each other. These can take root anywhere." As twilight deepened, Hope completed the song and ran to her parents. Elizabeth gathered her daughter close, feeling the medallion press between them. The circle complete. From market chains to family legacy. The woman with child promised by fate, Gojo murmured, echoing the words spoken when they first met. The mother of a future uniting peoples. Elizabeth smiled. Not just one future, she corrected, watching the diverse community her daughter would inherit. Many futures woven together.